There's a moment buried in season 6 of Sister Wives that, in hindsight, hits harder than the catfishing scandal, harder than the infamous knife in the kidneys meltdown, and even harder than the slow, heartbreaking collapse of the original 3 marriages. It's a moment wrapped in sentimental music and TLC's soft focus editing, but when you strip all that away, what remains is chilling. It begins innocently enough. Robyn Brown hands Kody a commissioned portrait, a gift, a token of love. That's how the show framed it. But this wasn't a portrait. This was a rewrite, a re-engineering of the reality itself. The photo shows a young, almost angelic Kody holding 3 babies, Dayton, Aurora, and Breen, as if he'd always been there, as if he were the one who'd rocked them to sleep, and fed them bottles, and kissed their little foreheads. Except, he didn't. He wasn't there. He didn't know those children as babies. They had a father, their father, David Jessop. To create this fantasy, Robyn took a real photo of Kody holding Christine's kids, erased the memory of another woman's actual motherhood, and digitally replaced the children with her own. She covered Christine's reality with her own imagination, and when she presented it to Kody, she smiled and said, "I created a moment that never happened." That line should have stopped everyone cold, because this wasn't just a misguided gift, it was the earliest, loudest warning that somebody wanted to erase an entire human being from the narrative. Someone was starting a quiet, calculated campaign to erase David Jessop's role in his own children's lives, and to replace him permanently with Kody Brown. Before we go peeling layer by layer of this psychological thriller, and believe me, it is a thriller, make sure you're subscribed to Sister Wives Crew. Hit that like button. We're going deeper than TLC ever dared, and what we've uncovered about the Brown family adoption arc will make you think of this show in ways you never thought possible. To get why this portrait became the most important red flag in Sister Wives history, you've got to go to what that picture symbolizes. Psychologists call this revisionist history, a tool often used by manipulators, narcissists, and people desperate to reshape the past so it better serves the present. It's not about love, it's about control, it's about emotional need, and in this family, need always circles back to one man, Kody Brown. Remember who Kody is at the very core, a man obsessed with ownership, with loyalty, with being the center of every universe in his orbit. To him, the fact that his soulmate Robyn, his favorite, his chosen one, had a life and marriage and children before his arrival is a laceration to his ego, a wound he can't heal, a wound he hates to look at. And Robyn, well, she knows exactly how deep that insecurity runs. So instead of asking him to accept her past, she starts erasing it. She manufactures a different version of their family, one in which Kody is not the second husband, not the stepfather, but the first, the only, the eternal. The most symbolic detail of all is the source image she chose for the portrait. She didn't choose some neutral background, or a solo shot of Kody. She chose a photo of him holding Christine's children, kids who actually were there. Then she replaced their faces with her own children's faces. Think about that. She has literally overlaid Christine's motherhood with her own fantasy. She cannibalized another woman's moment to elevate her own status in Kody's hierarchy. When she unveiled the portrait, TLC tried to make it wholesome, sweet, sentimental, but the wives' faces told the story the editing wouldn't. Their expressions flickered with discomfort, confusion, even grief. They weren't just looking at a picture, they were looking at a lie in a gilded frame. And when you go back and watch Robyn's voiceover now, it's haunting. She talks about wishing she had met Kody earlier, wishing he had been the father from day one, wishing her past could be undone. But what does that really mean? That means her children's real identity's real Marizar, something she wants to rewrite. Their father wasn't Kody, their early years weren't with Kody, and they know that, dud. So for whom is this portrait, really? Not the kids, not the family, it's for Kody. It's designed to let him fantasize he is the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega, the only father these kids should have ever known. And here is where it gets even darker. This directly ties back into Robyn's infamous purity speech. The moment she told a youth group that she had tragically given her purity to the wrong man, she painted this whole first marriage as a mistake, a stain, some regret she needed to scrub from her story. The portrait was the physical manifestation of that speech, her way of telling Kody, look, I fixed everything, I erased him for you. And the scariest part, it worked. Kody didn't blink, didn't question it, didn't say, Robyn, this is strange, I wasn't there. He stared at that false memory as if it were sacred, for in that image, he found the fantasy he harbors, the world in which he rescued those children, not just from their past, but from their biology. But it doesn't stop there. People close to Mormon fundamentalist circles say this wasn't just about jealousy, it was about politics, bloodlines, status. David Jessop isn't just some ex. He comes from the Jessop dynasty, a massive, powerful family in AUB circles. Robyn was married into prestige, she was leaving that marriage and latching onto Kody, a man who has always been obsessed with proving that he is more important than he actually is. So it created an invisible competition. Kody is not just competing with a biological father, he's competing with a legacy. That's why the push for adoption became so aggressive. It wasn't enough being a stepfather, he had to be the legal father. He needed his name on their birth certificates. He needed to overlay the Jessop lineage with Brown's identity. And what about the machine that fuels it all? The abusive ex-husband narrative. From day one, Robyn has portrayed her first marriage as a nightmare, abusive, terrifying, something worth escaping. And if that's true, that deserves empathy. But public records and deep dives from internet sleuths paint a much murkier picture than the saint victim storyline TLC packaged. And that complexity, that's precisely why the Eraser campaign was necessary. Because nothing threatens Kody's world like a man he can't outshine. The timeline of Robyn's divorce and the custody arrangements that followed has always been one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in Sister Wives. For years, TLC has skirted around it, never giving viewers the full picture. And that silence is telling, because when you look closely, the official story doesn't add up. Robyn has repeatedly painted her first marriage as a nightmare, a dangerous situation she barely escaped from. Yet in those early seasons, we watched her children pack bags, hop into cars, and go spend visitation time with their biological father, David Jessop. Family courts, especially in cases involving allegations of serious abuse, do not casually hand out visitation rights. Judges are cautious, they are protective, they are on the side of child safety. So if David was truly the monster Robyn and Kody described, why was he allowed visitation at all? That single question cracks open an entire narrative the show never wants to confront. Many people familiar with AUB circles, longtime viewers, and online investigators believe the truth is far more complicated than the villain X rescued damsel story Robyn and Kody promote. The insider theory is this: whatever toxicity existed in that first marriage was likely mutual, messy, or at least nowhere near the one-dimensional horror tale the show presents. But drowning David Jessop in shadows serves two incredibly convenient purposes for Robyn. First, it activates Kody's hero complex. Kody lives for the chance to play savior. Give him a damsel in distress, and he's suddenly 10 feet tall. Robyn's narrative lets him feel like the chosen protector, brave, benevolent, and morally superior. She knew exactly what she was doing. This story made him feel powerful. Second, and far more sinister, it morally justifies the erasure. If the biological father is dangerous, then pushing him out of the picture isn't manipulation, it becomes protection. It becomes love, it becomes a duty. This is how parental alienation thrives. Cloak it in righteousness, and the lie becomes sacred. And we actually watched this alienation unfold in real time. There's a scene deeply unsettling when rewatched where Kody is teaching the younger kids to ride bikes or play outside. Listen closely to the language. They're corrected, nudged, coached, encouraged to call him dad. The boundaries between stepfather and father are blurred purposely. This is not nurturing. This is conditioning. The portrait we discussed earlier, that was simply the visual reinforcement of a much larger campaign. The verbal alienation never stopped. The kids were reportedly told that their biological family didn't love them enough, didn't show up, didn't choose them. Meanwhile, Kody is framed as the hero who rescued them, who chose them, who stepped in where the other man supposedly failed. Imagine being a child and being told that the part of you that comes from your biological father, the part you can't control, is wrong, dangerous, shameful. Imagine being told that safety only exists if you erase your own history and replace it with someone else's. That creates a fissure inside of a child's identity, a split, a forced rejection of their very origins. And this is where the facade begins to crack, because the child who remembers the most, who lived the longest under his biological father's roof, is the one least likely to be fully rewritten. Dayton. For years, the show portrayed Dayton as fully engulfed in the Brown world, enthusiastic about the adoption, eager for the name change, loyal to Kody. But recent social media and quiet leaks from people close to the family suggest something very different. There are reports, more than a few, that Dayton has maintained some form of contact with his biological father. There are whispers that his decision to go off to college and later to move into an RV away from the central Brown household wasn't just about independence or Kody's obsessive COVID protocols. It may have been about distance, space from the suffocating loyalty test that Kody demands and Robyn enforces. Because think of the consequence if Dayton decides to to get reunited with David Jessop. The whole story falls apart. Kody's victory parade dissolves. The storyline of adoption loses its allure. The evil ex mythology crumbles. Kody cannot handle divided loyalty, not from Garrison, not from Gabriel, not from Isabel, and he certainly cannot handle it from the child he believes he rescued. This tension is broiling in the back of the current seasons. The portrait lie only holds if everyone keeps pretending, but these kids are not toddlers anymore. They can think, they can recall, they may question, they can pick up a phone. And that's what terrifies Kody. The name change ceremony was another key moment. It wasn't treated like a simple legal adjustment. It was turned into a sacred ritual, almost a baptism, a rebranding, a claiming. When those children signed those papers and the judge declared it official, Kody didn't look relieved. He looked triumphant. He looked like a conqueror who had just defeated an invisible enemy in his mind. He didn't just become their legal father, he defeated David Jessop in the struggle, but in that triumph, he sowed the seeds of his eventual collapse. Because you cannot build a family on a lie, you cannot demand loyalty from children while forcing them to deny their own memories. You cannot rewrite someone's personal history and expect them to never question it. And here's the cosmic irony, the karmic punchline playing out in real time. Kody Brown, the man who spent more than a decade accusing David Jessop of being absentee, irresponsible, uncaring, is now living out the very role he projected onto Robyn's ex. He has become the absent father. Isabel's surgery, for instance. He wasn't there. Look at Gabriel's birthday. He forgot. Look at Garrison. He wasn't there. He has emotionally abandoned 3 wives and 12 of his own biological children while congratulating himself for saving Robyn's. This is projection in its most stereotypical psychological manifestation. To accuse David Jessop of having failed his children while failing his own, he said David didn't care, while demonstrating to the world openly that he didn't care either. And what has David Jessop done in all this time? Nothing. He never ran to tabloids. He never created any channel on YouTube. He never cashed in on the drama. He remained silent. He kept private. Meanwhile, Kody has shouted his dysfunction from the rooftop. The erasure of David Jessop was never about protecting children. If it were, those kids would have been allowed to keep photos of their dad. They could have talked about him without the air getting thick. That way, they would have been able to recognize both parts of themselves. No, this was about Robyn and Kody. Robyn had to be the victorious survivor. Kody needed to be the victor. And the portrait, that framed, glossy fantasy tacked to the wall, that was the idol of their mutual fantasy. But if you're wondering why the other wives sat there, smiled, and said nothing, you're not alone. When that portrait was unveiled, Christine didn't gasp. Janelle didn't object. No one said, "This is deeply disturbing." They smiled. They nodded. They played along. Why? Because by then, the culture of fear was well established. Challenging Robyn meant challenging Kody, and challenging Kody came with consequences: accusations of jealousy, bitterness, disloyalty, or being unsafe. So they remained silent. They became complicit, not because they believed the lie, but not because there was some extremely high cost for telling the truth. This is how high-control families function. Everyone sees the emperor has no clothes, or in this case, the portrait has the wrong faces, but none has the guts to utter this aloud. Asterisk. There's another layer to this eraser story, one that insiders have whispered about for years. And it isn't pretty. It's money, child support, liability, debt. Whenever the Browns make a move, follow the money and the truth starts to flicker into view. For years, rumors have floated that the adoption wasn't just sentimental, it was strategic. Some claim it was pushed to cut off David Jessop's financial responsibilities so that Browns could fully fold the kids into the show's contract. Others say it was to block David from having any legal claim to the TLC money his own children were generating. Is it confirmed? No. But in the Brown universe, money is always sitting quietly in the corner, an uncredited cast member in every season. And once Kody became the legal father, he gained something he's always chased. Control. Control of the kids' image, control of their filming schedule, control of their narrative. Rewatch the footage with seasoned eyes and the cracks become impossible to ignore. Look at Aurora and Brina, children so desperate to belong that they overperform the role of being rescued. They cry on cue. They cling to Kody like he's a lifeline. They carry the emotional script someone else wrote for them. But here's the real question. Is that love? Or is that survival? Because when you're raised to believe your biological father was a mistake, you start to fear that you might be a mistake, too. You spend every day trying to earn your place. You try to prove you're a Brown because, in that house, being a Jessop has been painted as a sign. It's the pivotal point of the entire dark saga of Sister Wives. The drawing wasn't just a cute moment. It was a roadmap, a blueprint for how Robyn and Kody operate. They don't chase truth, they chase control. They shape reality, legally and emotionally, until it fits the image they want on TV, even if that means traumatizing their own children. But the painting was only the prologue. What followed the move to Flagstaff, the COVID rules, the total collapse of the family, those were the real chapters of destruction. Because here's the thing about erasing the past, it always comes back. You can delete a father from paperwork, but you can't delete the void he leaves behind. And into that void, Kody poured every ounce of his narcissism, until it overflowed and drowned everything else. Now that we're digging deeper, the police reports, the court documents, and the community whispers from Montana paint a very different story than the one TLC aired. The villain edit given to David Jessop, too neat, too convenient, too perfect for Kody's ego, which is where things start to get a little unnerving on the timeline. One of the most persistent theories from private investigators who track this family, the adoption was rushed, not just for emotional reasons, but because of a medical and financial emergency, the ATV accident. Remember that terrible accident where Dayton hurt his eye? Multiple surgeries, plastic reconstruction, long-term medical care. Now place that alongside the adoption timeline and the pieces start to click. At the time of the accident, Dayton was legally still tied to David Jessop, and who was supervising him? Kody. If a child still legally under the guardianship of another parent is severely injured under your watch, fallout can be huge: lawsuits, CPS investigations, even custody challenges. But not if you fix the paperwork first. Not if one rushes the adoption. Not if you get David Jessop to sign away his rights, because then Kody becomes the legal father, meaning he cannot be sued by the father. In an instant, the eraser goes from looking emotional to looking tactical. Calculated, sheltering Kody from liability. The show's golden couple would have remained protected. And what did David Jessop get in return? Silence. And a gag order is almost certainly part of the deal. That's why he never speaks. Not because he's guilty, but because he was threatened, paid, or boxed in so tightly that silence was his only option. It makes the portrait lie so much more sinister. It wasn't just art, it was the cover art of a legal settlement. Then comes the purity speech. This isn't just a weird moment, it is psychological warfare. Robyn hands her children lockets and tells them she gave her flower to the wrong man. She tells them they were conceived from a mistake. She insinuates that they exist because she failed. And then she corrects the story. Kody should have been the one to still have her purity, not their father, Kody. She is rewriting her history, not just theirs. This is emotional triangulation at its most vicious. If the children love David, they betray Robyn. If they acknowledge their biological father, it's betrayal. And that pressure doesn't go away, it mutates. Look at Aurora. Season after season, we watch her develop crippling anxiety, panic attack, and a hyper-fawning response to Kody. She jumps up when he enters the room. She clings to him. She cries when he's upset. This isn't affection. It's a trauma response. Because she saw what happened with her real father. She saw him disappear from photos, conversations, and family history. She saw him painted over literally. And she learned this lesson. If I don't please Kody, he can erase me too. Asterisk. Deep down, Aurora knows the truth. Membership in the Brown family is conditional. It isn't built on love. It isn't built on safety. It's built on performance. Loyalty equals survival. So she performs loyalty at 110%. Because the portrait lie taught her something life-altering. Fathers are interchangeable, identities can be rewritten, and nothing proves that more than the name change. It wasn't enough to switch the children's last names to Brown. They rewrote Dayton's first name to he was born David, named after his father, David Jessop. His identity, his lineage, his story all built into that name. But David vanished when adoption proceedings took place. Legally, superseded, filtered out. Just like a stain in Photoshop. Dayton, a manufactured combination of David plus Preston, became the new identity. But effectively, the David was scrubbed out. Imagine the psychological damage. You grow up knowing your name is David, your father is David, your whole sense of identity is wrapped up in that name. Then one day you're told, we're changing your name because we don't want to be reminded of him. Kody Brown couldn't stand having a David in his house. Every time he heard it, he was reminded that he was the second husband, the replacement husband, the beta in a story he desperately wanted to rewrite as heroic. So, he scratched off her name. He was marked with a new one. I name you. Therefore, I am the owner. The ultimate patriarch fantasy. But the cracks in the facade are widening, because now we do have the Dayton mystery. For years, Robyn pushed the narrative. Dayton has Asperger's. He needs to stay home forever. He must remain under her protection. It was the perfect tool to keep him tied to her hip, but he's resisting lately. According to insiders, he's not inside the house anymore. He's in an RV on the property, close enough to monitor, but separate enough to send a message. And the biggest bombshell, Dayton reportedly renewed contact with the Jessop family. If that's true, It is an earthquake. Think about what that means to Kody. He spent tens of thousands on lawyers. He spent 10 years on propaganda. He forced the change of name. He forced an adoption. He curated the story on national television. All to make sure Dayton would never look back. And yet here is Dayton, grown. Looking back, it is the eraser that failed. You cannot delete blood. You cannot edit out DNA. You cannot paint over a biological connection. And if Dayton rebuilds a relationship with his father, just a relationship, nothing more, it detonates the entire Savior Kody storyline. It proves Kody didn't rescue the kids from a monster. He took them from the father. And what about the karmas? It hit Kody harder than any ex-wife ever could, because while he obsessed over becoming the perfect father to Robyn's kids, he abandoned the children he actually created. He had accused David Jessop of being an absentee father, but Kody missed Isabel's scoliosis surgery. He suggested that she go alone. That's absentee. He has forgotten Gabriel's birthday. No call, no text. That's deadbeat behavior. Kody became the very villain he projected onto David Jessop. He stepped into the shadow he was trying to pin on someone else. Now look at Garrison, Gabriel Peden, Gwendolyn. They stare at Kody with the same disgust. Robyn conditioned her kids to feel toward David. The irony suffocates. Kody wanted to be the ultimate patriarch, the sun around which everyone orbits. Instead, he alienated every biological child he ever had. Only those he supports financially are loyal to him. And then there's the portrait. That accursed drawing didn't symbolize the plural family's end alone, it thus declared it. It said aloud what Kody and Robyn had never had the courage to admit. There is the real family, Robyn Kody, and her children, and then there is everybody else. It erased Christine's kids. It erased Janelle's children. It simply replaced them. It was Kody's emotional depth on paper. He can only support one family at a time. He needed to overwrite the others to love Robyn's kids. Christine attempted a smile, but her eyes were dead. She looked at the floor. They knew very well what they were seeing. This wasn't a gift. It was a declaration of war. It was Robyn saying, I will rewrite the past, and Kody will help me do it. She inserted herself into the early Brown years, the years she wasn't even present. Foreign pushed the original wives out of their own history. But the darkest layer, the religious sure. In their faith, the sealing is forever, eternity. Identify ancestry by adopting the kids and sealing them to Kody. Robyn effectively unsealed them from the Jessop line. This is spiritual warfare disguised as family unity. She used theology to justify parental alienation. If you don't accept Kody as your father, we won't be together in heaven. That is emotional blackmail at the most emotional, sacred level possible. A nuclear guilt trip directed toward children. While intertwined with all this is money, always money. Adopting the kids meant a larger cut of the TLC pie. More dependence, more plots, more leverage, more control. The children became assets of Kody Brown Entertainment. The adoption was not a family affair. It was a company merging process. And here's the fallout now. The youngest ones, Solomon and Ariella, are growing up in a fortress of paranoia. Anyone outside the house is an enemy. Their siblings are unsafe. The world is dangerous, because once you lie about a father, you have to lie about everything else to keep the narrative intact. You need to fabricate enemies to safeguard that original lie. First, the enemy was David Jessop, then the catfish, then Christine, then Janelle's boys. The circle gets tighter, smaller, darker, until it's just Kody and Robyn, isolated in a mansion full of overpriced art and unsold jewelry, staring at a portrait of a life that never existed. And now, insiders tell us, the relationship between Robyn's girls and the OG kids is non-existent, not because of the kids, but because Robyn prevents it. She's terrified they'll hear the truth, that their father isn't a monster, and Kody isn't a saint. The eraser only works when the subject stays silent, and the silence is breaking. Asterisk, the portrait lie was never just about the past. It was never simply a creepy sketch hung on a wall. It was a roadmap, a prophecy of exactly what Robyn and Kody intended to do next. Because right now, in real time, they are attempting the same erasure on a much bigger scale. They're trying to delete the existence of the first 3 wives entirely. They aren't just rewriting memories. They're reworking the show. In the latest tell-alls, Kody sits there with absolute confidence, almost rehearsed certainty, and claims he never loved Christine, never loved Janelle, never loved Mary. He insists those marriages were never real. He frames 30 years of shared homes, shared children, shared tears as nothing more than a performance. He is doing all that. Again, he is pulling a David David Jessop on his own. Wives, identify the target, vilify the target, rewrite the target out of history. And then crown himself martyr at last, with peace. It's the same tired playbook, but this time, the audience isn't falling for it, because unlike the kids who were conditioned to internalize the eraser, we have the footage, 18 seasons of it. We saw him in the delivery rooms. We saw him beam when those babies were placed in his arms. We saw him laugh, love, flirt, dance, hug, cry. These women weren't placeholders, they were his everything, and no amount of revisionist storytelling can erase that fact. The tragedy of the David Jessop eraser is that it worked too well on the children, but it completely failed on the viewers. We all felt the wrongness of that portrait moment. The room went cold. The air shifted. Something in us recognized the manipulation happening in real time. That was when the mask slipped. Robyn wasn't the sweet newcomer just trying to fit in. She was the director, editor-in-chief of the Kody Brown redemption arc. And Kody, he was the grateful lead actor willing to play the part because it made him feel powerful, adored, superior. But the question to be asked now is chilling. What happens when the portrait finally falls off the wall? Because one day, Aurora and Brianna are going to leave that house. They will marry. They'll create new families. They will enter the real world where they're in Snow Brown mythology. When that does happen, are they going to ask questions? Won't they ever wonder why their father's family disappeared? Will they be in touch with David? Will they learn they were pawns in someone else's narrative? Parental alienation leaves deep psychological scars. Sometimes it takes decades for the fog to lift. And these kids, they were stripped of their story, their identity, their name, their truth. For what? To soothe Kody's ego, to save Robyn from facing her own mistakes, to rewrite a marriage she didn't want to admit had collapsed. The selfishness is breathtaking. And here's the ultimate twist of fate. Kody got his wish. Exactly. He removed the wives who contradicted him. He ran off almost all his adult children. He destroyed the family. That defined who he is now. It's just him and Robyn and the portrait. The man who wanted a kingdom has sat in a crown of ashes. And look at him really. Look at him now. He's furious. He's bitter. He's unraveling. Because the perfect picture he spent years constructing, it's a lie. A lie he's now trapped inside. A lie that has become a prison. And rumor has it, the portrait has been shifted, taken down, quietly hidden. Maybe even Kody can't stomach the sight of it anymore. Maybe the eyes of those children pasted onto bodies of kids he abandoned have finally started to stare back, to judge him so that he could haunt him. That portrait is Dorian Gray by Kody Brown. While he tries desperately to appear young, relevant, ripped, blonde, and in control, that drawing contains the true story, the rot, the betrayal, the damage he caused. But we aren't finished yet. Close. Not even. We still have questions. We still need answers. What actually occurred during the adoption? Are there NDAs associated with it? Legally, who benefited? Financially, religiously? And most importantly, is Dayton to reconnect with David Jessop? As if he is? That is the sequel of this story we have all been waiting for. The return of the erased father. The undoing of the narrative Kody built his empire on. So make sure you're subscribed. We are literally watching court filings every single day in Flagstaff. We are watching every social media movement from the Jessop family. And if Dayton appears publicly with his biological father, even Onezu will hear it here first. Before we conclude, let me ask you one thing. Was that the creepiest moment in reality TV history? Or was it a desperate cry for help from a woman trying to bury her past under a layer of charcoal, shading? And perhaps the greatest question of all, did Kody destroy his entire family to protect a lie? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely read every single one. Share this video, because, just like Kody tried to bury the past, the algorithm tries to bury the truth. Don't let them. This has been your Sister Wives Deep Dive investigation into the portrait lie. The truth is still there, painted over, but visible, if you know where to look. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next deep dive.